Good evening and welcome to another YouTube video from Glastonbury Gabriel, this time with Jeff Kellison as well. Jeff sent us a video looking at the history of railroad watches, how they came about, why they're so accurate, etc, etc, etc. And we thought it'd be interesting to come back at the end of the video and actually talk about a few of these watches, maybe show you some and go into a bit more depth. These watches, some of which are over 100 years old, are more accurate than any Tag Heuer or any Rolex or any Breitling or any of these modern names. They're just as accurate. In fact, they set the standard by which modern chronometers are judged. So enjoy the video. It's one of Jeff's usual high quality videos, and we'll see you on the other side when we come back and have a little chat. So bye.
Hello everyone, it's Jeff again, and I am in Kiptom, Ohio, and I would like to tell you a story about something that happened here a long time ago. In the early days of American railroads, because of the vast distances between cities and towns and states, most of the rail lines were single rail lines, which means that if two trains were on the same track, one of them had the right of way and the other one was required to yield. So they had these nifty little books that the railroads put out that listed all of the little towns and the little stops along the way and what time the train should be at that exact spot. And they had sidlings that the trains were required to be off the main track on these sidlings if they were the train that was supposed to yield. So it was essential that you know exactly where you are and exactly what the time is, so you could be off the main line before the train that had the right-of-way got to your spot. Or if you had the right-of-way, it was 100% mandatory that you knew that the other train was off the main line. Well, the system worked pretty good for a few years until April 19th, 1891, when a express mail train and another train was on the same track at the same time in Kiptom, Ohio. Because 9 people were killed in the wreck, they had an extensive investigation, and one of the people that they asked to be part of the investigation was this gentleman right here, Webster Clay Ball. He owned a rather prestigious jewelry shop about 40 miles away in Cleveland, Ohio. Upon checking the watch of the engineer, he discovered that the watch had been stopped for 4 minutes before the accident. So in other words, he was 4 minutes late getting off the main line. He also testified that there should be minimum standards for the watches for the people whose responsibility it was to know where they were and the exact time that they were there. After the investigation was over, they set up minimum standards that were requirements for the watches that were carried by the people who had to know the exact time at any given moment. They had to have a minimum of 15 jewels to start with. It was later upped to 17 and then 19, and then later it went to 21 jewels. They also had to have a white face with Arabic numbers, and there was several other things that they required for a railroad watch after that point. They also started a program called Railway Timepiece Inspectors. They were people who rode the trains with the sole purpose of checking the engineer and the conductors and everyone's timepiece to see that it was within 30 seconds of the standard at any given time. The loss of life and property in the Kiptom, Ohio train wreck was almost beyond comprehension. And the railroads immediately implemented all of the programs that Webster Ball had in mind. In fact, the railroad companies banded together and paid him a salary and allowed him to work out all of the principles of what they needed to do and implemented them immediately. At this point in the story, I would like to introduce you to Jacob Bunn. He was a lawyer in Springfield, Illinois at the exact same time that Abraham Lincoln was a young lawyer, and they became the best of friends. As a matter of fact, from the time that Abraham Lincoln first ran for public office all the way to becoming president, it was Jacob Bunn and his brother that was the main people that gave him the money to mount his campaigns. Lincoln, of course, was assassinated in 1865. And in 1869, Jacob Bunn decided that he wanted to build a factory in Springfield, Illinois, building pocket watches. And he was one of the first people that embraced the principles that Webster Ball was saying needed to take place for railroad watches to improve. And he was one of the first manufacturers who started building true railway chronometers. These were not for the weak of heart. These watches cost half a year's salary for a railroad worker, but they were some of the most beautiful watches on the planet. This is a 21 jewel Bunn special built by the Illinois Watch Company of Springfield, Illinois. And I contend to you, on the day it was produced, dollar for dollar, it was the finest watch available on the planet. Or how about a 21 jewel Bunn 60 hour? The idea behind it was if you forgot to wind it, it would go all week through all of your shifts. Or the workhorse of railway pocket watches, a Bunn special. If you had an important job and you were a serious wage earner, you might be able to afford this little jewel, a 23 jewel Illinois Sangamo special. This little number was arguably the finest American watch produced on the day it was made. As many of you know, I am an avid watch collector, and there is no other watch that I would rather own than an Illinois. It is my absolute favorite American watch, built by the best friend of Abraham Lincoln. There were lots of other manufacturers that made railroad chronometers. This is a Hamilton Railway Special, which is a 992B. It is one of the favorite watches that was carried by railroad workers. It was unbelievably rugged. If it was dropped, it would run. When it was cold, it would run. When it was hot, it would run. It was an absolute workhorse, and it is a beautiful watch. Waltham was probably the first company that built a true railroad chronometer, and then Elgin came along. But in my opinion, I always loved the Illinois first, and then probably Hamilton. Webster Clay Ball went on to buy unfinished movements from the other American watch companies that were building railroad chronometers, And he finished them to his standards. He used his regulator and made changes that he felt like made them a superior watch to anyone else's. Well, that endeared him to some, and to others it didn't. A lot of the companies had issues with the changes that he made. One of the companies that he didn't always work and play well together with was Illinois. This is a Ball Illinois M10. And it is arguably, it's like the zenith, the apex of American watchmaking. However, Illinois didn't think it was any better than its 161A Ellenvar, so they didn't necessarily work and play well together. Some of the Ball collaborations with other companies, they made a whole bunch of them, like the Ball 999. But this animal right here, the Illinois Ball M10, is kind of a rare critter. And if you're wondering what Jacob Bunn's great-grandchildren are doing now, they're busy producing the finest commercial coffee maker on the planet, and probably the most popular commercial coffee maker on the planet. The devastating wreck in Kiptom, Ohio, completely changed the railroad's safety and timekeeping practices. And it also changed American watchmaking companies. They went from producing nearly worthless dollar watches to producing some of the finest chronometers made. And it all happened right here in the tiny little village of Kiptom, Ohio, population 240. I leave you now, as Gabriel Avalon would say, on High Street in Kiptom, Ohio. Remember, everyone, be good to each other, think good thoughts, do good deeds, and I will see you again.
So thanks, Jeff. That was a brilliant video. Guess what? We've got Jeff with us. Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
Hello, everyone.
Hey. Right. We thought we'd come back after this video simply just to show you some examples of these watches and just to sort of recap why they developed. In America, as Jeff said, they had great long distances, so they had to have accurate watches which would allow them to be specific about where they were on a track at a given time to avoid collisions and other mishaps. So in this country, we dealt in England with much shorter distances, so the tracks were controlled by signalmen who controlled the signals and the points using a system of rods and levers connected to a frame in the signal box, which they controlled the rails with. Obviously in America you couldn't have them because of the distances involved, hence the watches. So we thought we'd come back. I'm just going to get Jeff to tell us a little bit about these watches, and I'm going to show them to you as he's talking about them, just so that you can see that these watches still exist today and they are still as accurate now as they were 100 years ago. This is, you can't really see it, but that is a modern watch, a chronometer that's very accurate. And I can tell you that these 100-year-old watches are as accurate as this. So let's start off. Jeff's favourite. What would you say your favourite manufacturer was, Jeff?
Oh, Illinois by far. Yeah. I absolutely love Illinois watches because they were built in the heartland of America by people that they trained with no watchmaking experience, and they were very well made. They were reasonably affordable, and the railroad people loved them.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Well, here is one of those watches. This is a Bunn 60 hour. This was one of the premium watches available at the time. This probably would have cost close on 2 years' wages to a normal railroader. I'll turn it round because I hope you can see, if I light it, I hope you can see the beautiful intricacy of that movement. You could probably hear it ticking. I don't know if you can, but it makes a beautiful ticking noise. And as I say, that watch is accurate to 30 seconds a week, which in modern day watch terms is good, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, yes, they were. They had to be within, what was it, less than 3 seconds a day to make railroad standards.
We've got another watch here. This is a Ball watch, another manufacturer involved in the making of railroad watches, and this is a 999B. This again, like the Illinois over here, is a high-end watch and probably would have cost somebody between a year and a half and 2 years' wages. These probably are the two of the finest watches on the railroad at the time. Some of the best examples. Would you say they were better than these, Jeff?
No, I wouldn't say there was better. There was some high-end other railroad watches, though. The Sangamo, Illinois was another one that was a very good watch. And of course, the Santa Fe employees had Illinois Santa Fe watches. But the 60-hour and a 999B, they were right up at the top.
Okay, so this coming down slightly is another manufacturer involved in watches and big American manufacturer of timekeeping in general, and that's the Hamilton Watch Company, who made many watches. I have here, I think I've put it away, I have a Hamilton khaki wristwatch, which is a beautiful watch. So again, this is the 992. Again, you can see inside the movement there. And if you look at these, the movements, the actual design of these interior movements, they're not completely dissimilar because they're being built to a standard, aren't they, Jeff? They're being built to a specification, pretty much.
Yeah, Lapine. They were all built basically the same. However, they were one of the reasons that they were all similar is because the railroads were continually refining them and making them simpler.
Mm-hmm.
And that process, of course, made them all similar.
Yeah. And of course, the jewel count, I believe it started at 15, 17, 19, and it went to 21. And of course, if you go above 21, you're putting jewels on winding mechanisms, and it doesn't make much difference, does it?
Yeah, anything above a 17 is considered a fully jeweled movement.
Okay. One other quick little thing, Jeff mentioned this being a lupine type. If you notice, this back plate is made of several parts, and again, likewise on this one. These are what's called lupine. This, however, is a full back. That's all one plate. The whole back plate is one plate, and whereas on this one you can see that the balance wheel going backwards and forwards is sunken within the movement. On these full plates at the back, it sits on top of the movement. Now this was a railroad standard up until a certain point when the lupine became required, didn't it? I believe.
Yeah. Also, that watch was fully railroad grade at the time that it was built, but later on, as they increased jewel count, they made changes as far as at one point they outlawed hunter watches where the crown is not at the 12 o'clock position, and they made some other changes, and also they said no decorations on the dial. But most railroad workers, or a lot of railroad workers, once they retired, they would go to a decorated dial.
As you can see here on the Elgin, this has now got a decorated dial on it, which wouldn't have been allowed when it was in use. One of the specifications was it was what they call an open face, which meant it couldn't have a closing lid on it, could it?
Yes, that's right. And it had to also be a lever set.
Absolutely. Now that's an interesting thing. I've got a War Department watch here, which we looked at an earlier video. It has a different story. But if you can see, to adjust this one, you pull that up, much like a watch, and turning that, adjust the things. Now, the thinking in the railroad standard was that if that happened in your pocket without you knowing, you could adjust the watch and not know. Even if you adjusted it by as little as a minute, you would be in trouble. So the method they use, and I'm going to show you on this watch here, I'm going to open it up. These cases all have fronts and backs which screw off for maintenance. These are what's called a display or a salesman's case, because they have glass at the back. Normally this would have been solid, you wouldn't have been able to see this. It wasn't something that interested them in those days. The salesman's sample cases were used purely so that when you went into the jeweller's, they could show you what was going on inside without having to keep opening it up, because obviously you don't want to keep opening watches because dust and stuff gets in. So anyway, to set your watch, you unscrew the front case. Now some of these cases will pop off, which is why you see people wearing a pocket knife on their fobs, because they would use that to pop the front casing off. Anyway, we're not that hardcore here. We have screw off faces. Now, as you can see there, I've removed that, and I don't know if you can see up at the 2 o'clock position. Actually, it's nearer the 1 o'clock position, but up here there's a tiny little lever, and I've got to put my glasses on to do this because I'm blind. You put your finger in there and you pull up a little lever. Now I hope the camera could see that lever that I've now pulled up. Now, as you can see, if I turn this, can you see the hands move? So that's how you do it. When you finish setting it, the lever goes back down, and once the lever's down, you can screw the front on, because that is an interference fit with that lever. If the lever's out, you can't screw the face on. So once that lever's in, the watch is safely set. You put your case back on, and provided it's wound up, that watch is safe. It can't have its time changed. It can't be accidentally knocked. That time is not changing on that watch. So that's the lever set. Now another interesting thing about these watches is, as Jeff alluded to in his video, America went from making effectively what were dollar watches, which were really cheap, not that accurate, very basic machining of the insides, through the necessity to not kill people on their trains. The American watch industry developed to be the best in the world. We consider today the Swiss, don't we, Jeff, being the pinnacle of watchmaking, but a lot of the American companies are over there now, working in Switzerland, and also the standards which the Swiss are famed for were set by the American companies with the railroad watches. Is there anything I haven't covered there, Jeff, that you want to add?
Just the only thing I would add is that you guys didn't have time zones, and we of course have time zones, which is why your 999B has 4 hands. Because a train engineer would have to, at some point, he would cross a time zone.
That's right. So you actually have 2-hour hands. I don't know if you can, how clearly you can see on this camera, but you have 2-hour hands. You have a red one and a blue one. And so that allows you to tell if you're changing a time zone. If you're going west, obviously the time zone is going to slip. So you're going to go back an hour every time. And if you're going east, then obviously you're going to put an hour on. So using the double hour hand, you could very quickly work out where you were. Now we don't have an example here because it's at the watchmakers, sadly, but we have another one which has a thing called a Ferguson dial on it. So I'll put a picture in the description. Now as you can see from this dial, precedence is given to the minutes. The hours are the small numbers, but the minutes are quite prominent and very, very obvious. The reason being is when you're using these watches and you're traveling along and you need to know exactly where you are, it's down to minutes. It's not important if it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. You know what time of the day it is in hours, but what you're interested in are the minutes. So hence the Ferguson dial. So I guess you're asking now is, Why am I sat here in England sitting on top of some fine examples of American railroad watches? Well, in this country, they're quite rare because obviously they're American railroad watches, but in America, I wouldn't say they're two a penny, but you can pick them up cheap as chips in fairs. And Jeff is going to tell us about a fair that he used to go to, where some of these watches actually came into our hands, so that we could actually restore them. Because these have all been restored by the amazing Finn over at the Underground Horology store in Bristol. So, Jeff, tell me a bit about the markets and the flea markets, because we have car boot sales over here, um, and you would not pick something like this up on a car boot sale because somebody would have bought it and banged it on eBay by now. So, in America, how do these markets work and what are they?
Well, in the southern part of the United States, we have a lot of flea markets, and some of them are quite large. Like when I worked for Sit-in Motor Lines, I used to go to, there was one called the Bel Air in Fontana, California, and I used to go there fairly often. And that actually is where I picked up your 60 hour. And it was in pieces when I got it, and it was only a few dollars, and it has been lovingly restored.
It has. It has. We're very lucky to have found Finn over there in Bristol. Um, he's only a young chap, isn't he, Jeff? But he knows his way around watches, and he makes an absolutely beautiful watch. I mean, if you saw these watches before he got them in his hand, you wouldn't think they're the same watches. I mean, these look like new inside. There's not a mark on them. And as I say, when the radio pips go on Radio 4 to tell you it's the hour, that's where these watches are. Bang on the hour. So, again, in America, they're just easier to pick up, aren't they, Jeff?
Well, the one of the problems with gold going as high as it did is people are taking these old watches and they're pulling them out of the cases and they're melting the cases down, and they're selling the movements, which people at the swap meets consider them not worth very much. And so they're selling them pretty cheap. And I, of course, in my travels, as I travel around and I find them, I've been picking them up and getting the necessary parts to put them back together. And the ones that have been sent to you obviously went through Finn's shop and were restored, completely restored to working order.
Because actually, people assume, I certainly assume when we started out on this journey, that if something went wrong with one of these, parts would be hard to find and they'd be expensive. But that's not the case, is it?
No, no, there isn't a single part on any of those railroad watches that I can't pick up on the American eBay for less than $20. And all of basically the entire watch, there isn't anything you can't get. All of the dials on your watch have been lovingly restored by a very old gentleman in Missouri, in West Plains, Missouri.
And he does make a beautiful job because these faces are gorgeous. And as you saw, that Ferguson with the red numbers on it is a real piece of action. I love that. I love that dial. Um, so yeah, I mean it's fascinating. So somebody in this country, if they could actually get the bare bones of one of these, maybe by buying it on an American eBay auction and importing it, would be able to get a watch which their local watchmaker could restore for them, uh, and with them ending up with a beautiful, accurate pocket watch for not a lot of money, really, in the scheme of things. I mean, over here, if you were to put one of these on eBay, new, in this condition, working, they just go for silly money because they're not over here. But in America, of course, they're everywhere, aren't they?
In America, old railroad watches are fairly easy to find at the sales and on eBay and a lot of the swap meets and all that. And parts are very easy to get, and it's just a matter of knowing the basic model numbers. And of course, I love Hamilton watches, and I love Illinois watches, and I love Ball watches. Webster Clay Ball was kind of an interesting person in that he decided that he was going to go his own way and buy unfinished movements from the different watch companies and build his own watches out of them. Your 999B is actually a Hamilton. It's a Hamilton Ball. And their association, his association that he had with these companies was good in some cases, was tenuous in others, and it is a very interesting thing that they had going on.
That's fascinating. I just want to show you something as an aside just before we end this video. You've heard the name Waltham mentioned as one of the manufacturers that Ball work with on some of these watches. Well, here's a railroad watch, and just out of interest, here's a Model T Ford dashboard clock. And if I turn it upside down, it looks very much like a large pocket watch, which in fact is what it is. And yet, if you look at the time on this, this has an 8-hour spring on it, 8-day spring. So this, you wind this up, it lasts for 8 days. This is a very accurate railroad watch, and they were both calibrated a time ago. Look at that. These old watches keep beautiful time. They really do. I recently was away for a while, and Jeff was a bit sceptical as to whether this would run for the full 8 days. So I went away for a few days. I wound it up and I set it against my Invicta, and I came home and it was 3 minutes out and it was still running. And Jeff was gobsmacked, weren't you, Jeff?
Well, yes, I was, because those the Waltham, the car dash clocks that they built for the Model T, they're only 7 jewel.
Yeah, and they're very simple inside. Very simple.
They're a very, very simple full plate movement, and they weren't very expensive for the car manufacturers, but it was amazing that it was still running. Plus, that watch has never been restored. That watch is directly from a boot sale in Detroit, Michigan.
We're not sure if it was even in a Ford, are we? Because this is the original pouch that it came in. It's just a beautiful thing. I'm going to have it converted into a desk clock because it just matches my other watches. Anyway, I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover. It was literally just a case of Jeff's told that amazing story about how these came along, so we thought we'd show you some, tell you how if you're interested you could get into owning one of these. And just basically filling you in on the background. So I hope you enjoyed that. Jeff, thank you so much, and again thank you for giving me this hobby, because until I met Jeff I didn't know. I knew I liked fob watches because I actually had one. I bought one in my first one in Belgium. It's a Roscoff, which I believe is a Russian make, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, it is.
It is. And as the very least I could do, that is now in Jeff's possession in his truck over there somewhere, because he keeps sending me these. So I sent him the only one I had. But interestingly, that was quite an accurate watch, but very basic design inside. A little bit like this, I guess. But yeah. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed everything we've shown you today. If you have any questions, put them in the link down below. Either Jeff or I will answer. Probably Jeff, because he's more knowledgeable than I am on these matters. But for now, that's it. We will be coming to you with more videos. I hope eventually to go up to the York Railway Museum to compare these to their English railway watches, which just were not as good. That's it, really. We just wanted to show you a bit about these watches, how the fact you could actually own one, and either if you have a watchmaker, build it yourself, or find somebody who could build it for you. If you do find yourself in one of these and you need some work doing on it, I can put you in touch with the guy who works on ours. He's in Bristol. You can post it to them. They're a great shop. They do a beautiful job, and and he will be glad to help you out there.
And please believe me, you can trust him because he has one of my Rolexes, right?
Yes, he currently has one of Jeff's Rolexes, and Jeff gives his Rolexes to nobody apart from God. So that's a recommendation in itself. Now the other thing is, we are going to be building a couple of watches because Jeff has found some really nice skeletonized movements. Do you want to tell us a bit about them, Jeff?
Yeah, I have I found two very nice skeletonized movements, and I included them in the box that I sent over there. And Finn is going to put together two very nice skeletonized watches in salesman sample cases, glass front and back. They will be timed, they will be regulated, they will be ready to go, and they will be the perfect size so that they can be worn by either a man or a woman, and that's what we're giving away.
Thanks, Jeff. And so those movements have come over. Now, we're going to give them away to celebrate the fact that after 2 years, two and a quarter years, the target which we're aiming for, which is 1,000 subscribers, is nearly upon us. We're at 830 something as I record this video with Jeff, and so the idea is that those watches are going to be given away free of charge, no catch, no nothing. You haven't got to sign up for anything, give any address, anything like that. All you need to do is be subscribed to the channel on the date we draw. So if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe to be in with a chance of winning. And the more of you subscribe, the quicker we can do this competition, because now the watches have arrived. There's nothing to hang on for, is there, Jeff? Because Finn will have those built quite quickly.
Finn will knock those out fairly quickly, I'm sure, because one of the things that I found recently at the swap meet was a Ball Trainmaster wristwatch, which is something that Finn really wanted, and it was in the box for him also.
So that's how we get our watchmaker to make us favours. We send him the odd watch. Nicely done, Jeff. Well, I'm going to bring this video to an end because I don't want people falling asleep. But look for more watch videos. I'm going to be going to York Museum at some point to compare American watches with ours, just to see what the difference was. We've got, apart from the giveaway, we've got some other bits and pieces we're going to be doing soon with watches. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you again, Jeff, for joining us, and thank you again so much for making these available so we can make this video. It's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So you be safe driving around America. Where are you off to now?
I am in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, on my way to Cordele, Georgia.
So you're heading down south. Anyway, Jeff, it's been an honour, thank you, and a privilege, and I love these watches. I adore them. As you can see, I have a chain, and if you ever see me on video, any video, you'll see me somewhere about me. There's a chain on me, and at the end of that chain will be a watch.
You should show them your fob that I just found at swap meet and sent you the little compass so you can find your way home.
With every good watch comes a good fob, and here's one that Jeff sent earlier for me. This is an Albert chain. You would connect it to your waistcoat with the T-bar, and then this chain would go into the right hand pocket, this chain would go into the left hand pocket, and your fob hangs down at the bottom. Now, because I'm not particularly a cross type of person, what we also have here to replace it is a rather splendid tiny compass, which will help you find your way home on a dark night. But yes, I mean, we have other fobs here. These are a couple of ancient American coins in special holders which can be added on, and of course the other thing that you would normally have, and I've got it in another room, is a knife. because on one of these you'd have your watch and on the other one you'd have your knife, because not all watches screw open, and the only way to open them is to click them open with a knife blade, and that's why you often see people, and it's to this day it's called a pocket knife. So that's brilliant. It's been absolutely fabulous having Jeff here to talk to us. I hope you've learnt something. I've learnt. This has been a journey for me, and I'm learning an awful lot. In fact, you might have been bored by me before now. If you bumped into me in the street and said anything slightly related, I probably got this out and started regaling you with the history of watches and boring you. If that is the case, I make no apologies, because it's fascinating. So,
And this is probably the case where I should apologize to everyone in Glastonbury for unleashing you within the confines of their city with these watches.
absolutely, but thank you. So, anyway, I'm going to say goodnight now and go away and put this video together. Jeff's going to do the same thing, and we will take it from there. Good night, everybody. Good night from me.
Bye from America.
Goodbye.